Praise the Lord Jesus Christ and welcome to today's Explainer. You know, we spend so much time thinking about our actions, our rituals, and our daily habits. But how often do we actually stop and diagnose the engine driving all of it? Are we operating out of deep, genuine devotion, or is there some hidden current of dread pushing us along? Today, we are unpacking a really paradigm-shifting perspective from our source material that pulls apart the complex dynamic between love and fear.
Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. Before we get deep into the analysis, it is just wonderful to simply gather around these concepts. We really want to open our minds, approach this with a ready heart, and study the true depth of these teachings together.
So here is the absolutely crucial question. Do we love God, or are we just terrified of Him? It's provocative, right? Think about it. When you avoid doing something wrong, is it because you genuinely want to honor the Creator, or because you're secretly terrified of a lightning bolt coming down from the sky? Are we holding on to faith as a relationship or as an insurance policy against divine punishment? Let's explore exactly how the text answers this.
Let's dive right into Section 1, Love versus Fear.
To understand this foundational tension, 1 John 4:18 lays it out clearly. It says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment." Our source emphasizes that if you're constantly anxious about being punished, if you worry God is going to take away your blessings the exact second you mess up, then your love just isn't perfect yet. True, fully realized love naturally repels that kind of terror, because if you're constantly afraid of losing your standing, you're focusing entirely on the punishment, not the relationship.
Moving on to Section 2, the disciples' doubt.
To see what this looks like in the real world, let's look at the very people who walked alongside Jesus every single day. We find them in Mark chapter 4. They're out on a boat, a massive storm hits, and Jesus is fast asleep. The disciples wake him up in a total panic, screaming, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" This brilliantly illustrates our core theme. The absolute second a physical threat arrived, their immediate reaction was terror and a sudden assumption that God didn't care about them. Their fear completely overrode their trust.
The order of these events is absolutely vital here. Step 1, the storm hits, representing the unavoidable trials of life, right? Step 2, the disciples panic, gripped by the fear of death and nature. Step 3, Jesus wakes up and calms the sea with a single word. But step 4 is where the real lesson lies. Jesus questions their fear. He essentially asks, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" He wasn't just annoyed they woke him up from a nap. He was pointing out that their intense panic revealed a lack of perfect love and trust. They were followers, for sure, but they were terrified followers.
Let's pivot to Section 3, Job's anxious obedience.
Now let's transition over to the Old Testament to look at one of the most famous figures associated with righteous suffering. The source material offers this fascinating reevaluation of Job. We usually hear about Job's fear of the Lord as his beautiful holy reverence, but the text argues that his fear was actually a constant trembling anxiety over losing his earthly security. He lived in a state of dread. He was constantly offering sacrifices just in case his children sinned, completely driven by the anxiety that God might suddenly take it all away. And the text points out that Satan recognized this. Satan actually saw that Job's obedience was partly fueled by this terror.
And this brilliantly illustrates the danger of living in that state of dread. Just look at Job 3:25. "What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me." The source emphasizes that Job's obsessive dread of tragedy actually manifested in his life. He spent his days terrified of divine wrath and sudden loss, and that exact terror became his reality. It's a stark warning against living a life of faith where your primary motivation is simply trying to appease an angry God so he won't destroy your life.
Which brings us to Section 4, Servant versus Son.
So, if we aren't supposed to operate out of trembling anxiety, what's the alternative? Think about a workplace. A servant, or an employee, often obeys the boss simply out of the fear of getting fired or punished. They appease the master just to protect their paycheck. But a son or a daughter in a healthy family, they operate entirely differently. They honor their father out of love, deep respect, and genuine relationship. Drawing from Malachi 1:6, the source material asks us to really consider this. Is God our father, or just a boss we're absolute terrified of? If he is our father, where's the loving honor rather than just the terrified compliance?
Because honestly, if your entire relationship with the divine is based on being terrified of his power, you aren't exactly in unique company. As James 2:19 points out, even the demons believe and shudder. Demons are completely terrified of God. They know his power and they tremble because they know they'll face his wrath. The source makes a really compelling point here.
If our faith is defined merely by being scared of God's punishment, we are operating on the exact same emotional frequency as demons. Believers are called to a much higher, fear-free devotion rooted in love.
And finally, Section 5, perfect love casts out.
So how do we actually apply this revelation to our daily lives? Well, the crucial takeaway is that when your love for God becomes perfect and primary, it acts like a shield against worldly terrors. The source material lists several specific things believers no longer need to fear. You don't need to fear demons, dark forces, or false curses because you know the supreme authority. You don't need to live in paralyzing fear of sickness, physical harm, losing your wealth, or getting fired. You don't even need to fear societal judgment. When God is placed first in perfect love, all of those earthly anxieties completely lose their grip on your mind.
And the ultimate result of that kind of love is profound peace. Proverbs 3:24 captures this beautifully. It says, "When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet." This is a direct contrast to Job's sleepless anxiety. Job laid awake, terrified of what he might lose tomorrow. But a heart filled with perfect love can lie down in the middle of a chaotic world and experience sweet, restful sleep, knowing that they are held by love, not watched by a tyrant waiting to punish them.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. Are you ready to step out of fear and into perfect love? It really is time to examine the engine of our faith. Are we trembling like servants, or are we resting securely like children who know they are completely loved? It's a profound shift, and one that changes literally everything about how we walk through this life. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpacked this incredible source material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.